joined today by the chairman of Matchroom Sport, Barry Hearn. Barry, how are you?
I'm good, my friend. Good to talk to you.
Likewise. And we have Alex here as well. And we have to start off, obviously heard that you were in hospital this week, so want to ask about your health. How are you doing? How's the recovery going?
Yeah, listen, it's one of those things you've got to get through. I had a heart attack 18 years ago. This one wasn't as strong, so that's a positive, but I knew what to expect. They did a brilliant job on me with the NHS. Sunday night, had one night in critical care, came out, transferred to another hospital on the Monday. They operated on the Tuesday, and Wednesday night I went home. So I'm under instructions, which I shall not completely ignore, of course, because they know what they're doing, but no gym for 4 weeks. Gives me plenty of time to sit around, talk to guys like you, and plan the future. As always, I'm in a state of permanent excitement, and that's how I live my life. So I'm in reasonable shape, and I'm sure I'll get stronger and stronger as the days proceed.
Good to hear you're on the mend, and obviously it's a weird time for everyone, but a lot going on behind the scenes. What's been the hardest part for Matchroom? Venue logistics, calendar logistics, the uncertainty, or something else?
Yeah, I think the uncertainty is the worst part, because if you no matter how much shit you're in, if you knew a date when you're going to be out of this shit, you can plan accordingly. Mm-hmm. And the big uncertainty is we don't know how long this dreadful virus pandemic's going to last. Clearly, it's going to disrupt our lives for a lot longer than we'd like. My job I have 650 event days this year globally. That's a logistical nightmare in these times. And obviously, I'm also more than aware that most of my people that I care about, apart from my own employees who are 100% safe and will be paid in full however long this goes, because that's the type of company we run. But my big concern is my players. They're self-employed people. They rely on activity to earn their living, to put bread on the table, to pay their mortgages. They've got wives and children. So I'm very desperate for their sake to get things back to normal. But, our hands are tied, and we have to be seen to be responsible, mature. Therefore, we have to follow government guidelines. There's no shortcuts to this. So the worst thing is the uncertainty and how long, but it doesn't stop you trying to be creative in the background to try to stimulate activity so that people can feed their children.
So, as you mentioned, the uncertainty is a big thing, and we'll start by talking darts. We know that everything's off until June at the earliest, possibly July, if not later. And you mentioned you have to care about the players, and considering that it's now in darts a near global playing contingent, under what conditions do you expect it'll be right to start the season back up?
Well, at the moment, I've spent the last few weeks planning, looking at what's possible, what's not possible. This is going to go on, I think, we know for the next 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to be, I think, an extension of the lockdown, I believe, before there's any chance of anything happening. We are looking at 3 or 4 stages. One is behind closed doors, in as far as in your own house. Second stage is behind closed doors in as far as tournaments without crowd. And the third may be limited crowds, but standard tournaments before we go on to the utopia of 4, which is back to normal. Estimates of how long that's going to take vary. We're seeing slowdowns in Spain, Italy. We're beginning to see, I think in a week's time or so, we should see a beginning of a slowdown in the UK. But don't forget, we're a global sport now, so it's not a question of, okay, we can have Players' Championships games behind closed doors, because we can't if our membership can't travel to play. It wouldn't be fair. So that's a big issue in terms of rankings, in terms of what's going to happen with Q School next year. There's 1,000 things which we can't make a decision on yet, and we've got to wait and see. The 4 phases of recovery that we're working on, I don't think we've covered that. Phase 1 is going to be an expansion of our in-your-house entertainment, if you like. Phase 2 will be behind closed doors. tournaments. Phase 3 will be limited crowd events, and Phase 4 is back to normal. Next week we'll announce a major move on not behind closed doors, in your own house development. We have a brilliant team of administrators that have been working on a master plan to involve the entire tour on a real extravaganza of darts. It will lack the atmosphere of a crowd, of course, and it will be not at the production level that we're used to, but it will give us a regular supply. And as I say, I've got to tease you on that because the announcement on that will be early next week. So watch this space and get ready to see a lot of darts.
That's good to hear. And just touching on the TV events, your colleague Matt Porter's done a few interviews in the last few weeks with regards to about the Premier League. It wouldn't really work behind closed doors without a crowd, but could we potentially see other TV events go on behind closed doors?
Yeah, we can't say no to anything for sure, because the most important thing is the players, and they have to earn money, and they earn money when we stage events. Now, the crowd is just a question of, they're brilliant for the atmosphere, of course, but they contribute significantly to the finances of an event. But the PDC is a major company, and given the choice of no event or an event without a crowd, we would generally opt for an event without a crowd to maintain the earning power of our players. The next big event clearly is the World Cup scheduled at the end of June and the World Match Play in July. And we're literally reviewing this on a daily basis of, is it going to happen? Can it happen? What's the circumstances to make it happen? We're not cancelling anything. So the message to the players and the darts fans is, look, now we're all in this mess together. We're not cancelling. When I say we're not cancelling, we are going to cancel things like the World Series in New York, as you know, because that's not going to happen. And we're going to cancel Australia in August. But everything else, we are postponing. And it just means that when we get back to normal, we're going to be really busy, and the players will be catching up on their earning potential. That's the plan.
Well, we're going to ask you about both those things. And you mentioned the World Series, you mentioned postponing events. Let's start with the World Series. New York and Australia and New Zealand events kicked to 2021. How big of a blow is that to the PDC, considering the emphasis the PDC is placing on the World Series to grow the game globally?
Well, the World Series has been fantastically successful for us in exactly achieving that. And the broadcasters it's brought in for our other events has been significant. But, this is the world we're operating in, and we have to be realistic. If at the end of the day we have to go on ice for a period of time with the World Series, in this case a year, we've rescheduled the Copenhagen event for October, but the other events will be cancelled for this year. And so what does it affect? It affects PDC profitability, and a limited number of players won't earn the money they would have earned in World Series. In what's going on in the world, that's a small price to pay. But obviously we want to limit the number of events that come into that category, which we're endeavouring to do, as you've seen on Premier League and European Tour events and Pro Tour events. We will move heaven and earth to catch those events up by the end of the year. So whereas the players, the fans, the PDC have a short-term problem, we're determined that it doesn't become a long-term problem.
You touched on it there, really. Fixture congestion is almost inevitable, really. But is there a chance that some of the bigger events in the autumn get postponed and pushed back, including the World Championship, in order to complete the season, or some of those might get cancelled?
No, if we're allowed to play, we will play. And if that means we're playing 7 days a week to catch up, we'll play 7 days a week. If there was 8 days, we'd play 8 days. So our big concern for me is that everybody gets their opportunity, because we've created a field of dreams with darts for darts players. We're not going to change our focus. We're helping the PDPA, obviously. They've made a contribution to everyone's expenses initially on a non-refundable grant, and we're creating a substantial benevolent fund so that people, Pro Tour card holders who are important to us, that come under hard times will get financial assistance by advances. But the main concern is these guys want to play darts. So we've got to create opportunity, whether it's in their own homes or whether it's behind closed doors or whether it's normal events. If we have to have a sabbatical for a few weeks, which looks like we are, we will be postponing, not cancelling, the vast majority of the events we do, and then we'll be playing catch up for the rest of the year. And if I hear one player say, "Oh, I'm too busy," I'll kill him. So it's gonna. We're in where we are. But the most important thing, what I want to get to, is when we come round, hopefully in a healthy world, to the World Championships in December, we look back over the year, we examine the character we've shown, the resilience we've shown, and we say, "Do you know what? That was a tough few months for everybody, but we're back where we were. We've caught up on everything. We've fulfilled our obligations to players, to sponsors, to broadcasters, and now we're ready to get back to normal." The game's in a very healthy state. The PDC, as a company, is run, if I say it myself, extremely well. We have cash reserves. We are not the type of people that take the money and run. We save up for a rainy day, and suddenly we find ourselves where the weather is pouring, not raining. But we are in a position far stronger than most sports in as far as we haven't spent our money. We've got reserves, we've got resources, and we can get through this troubled time. And when we do, we will come out, as always, stronger than we went in.
Well, you mentioned better than some other sports and some other organizations. We'll get to one of those eventually, but let's talk about some of your other sports in your portfolio. World Snooker season was nearly complete when everything had to go on pause, and the World Championships now it looks like it's going to be arranged for late summer. Do you think that might mean there might have to be an abbreviated season next year, or has those plans not even been thought about?
Well, again, we think about it all the time because we look on plans A, B, C, and D, and there are always four ways of looking to see what's going to develop. The biggest problem, I think, for all sports at the moment, especially global sports like darts and snooker, is the fact that the travel restrictions don't make it a level playing field for everybody. Because clearly, if someone can't get out of their country, how the hell can they compete in a ranking system that is played in, like, the majority of it in Europe? So we've got to wait and see how other countries develop as well. You know, you've enough experience of America, which is obviously a huge pandemic there and growing. We don't know how long it's going to be before people will want to fly to America or vice versa, Americans fly to Europe. So we've got to just make sure that we've got our plans in place. On the snooker side, I think we've allocated the dates previously reserved for the Olympics. And really, it's a fingers crossed job, you know. We're gambling that by the end of July, early August, we can stage the World Snooker Championships at the Crucible in Sheffield, or we can stage it without a crowd. One of those is more than likely to be an option, but circumstances will tell us, and the government will advise us what is safe and healthy to do. We're not going to take a risk with the health or safety of our officials, our staff, or our players. But clearly, the world has got to, at some stage, get back to normality. We just got to make sure that we're in a position to be there, to be ready. But we're geared up now to create events within a 3 or 4 day platform because the infrastructure is in place. It's just a question of when that green light shines. We can't really give a definitive answer more than that in today's circumstances.
Back to the darts, the rumours are that the BDO are set to lose their spots in the Grand Slam this year. Even if that's not the case yet, everyone's aware of their financial issues at the moment. What do you think should happen to those 8 spots if the BDO is no more?
I think they should. The Grand Slam is a unique event. It features amateur players as well as professional players. I think that principle should maintain itself. The question of selection will very much depend on, as I say, I have no idea what's happening with the BDO. We've had discussions with the WDF about what they're going to do. But, you know, with all the problems with the BDO, WDF, the lack of finance that both of them have to carry out their roles effectively, when you add the coronavirus to it, goodness me, you know, it becomes almost an unsolvable mystery. If we assume that by the time we come around to late October, November, when the Grand Slam's on, that we are allowed to do an event, then we would still use every effort through whatever selection process seems appropriate to select the number of amateur players to maintain the unique format of the Grand Slam.
So you mentioned that unique aspect of the Grand Slam. You also mentioned the WDF there. So I'm audibling a bit because you kind of answered a few of our questions that we were planning to ask before we asked them. Could you see the WDF taking over the amateur game?
The big problem you've got is, let's be realistic, none of them have got any money. They haven't got working capital. And this is what I said earlier about the strength of the PDC is from day one we've run a proper business, a profitable business, a sustainable business. Yes, we've done amazing things with the prize money, of course, because it's gone from, in my time, from £500,000 a year to 16 million, which is great. But we could have gone bigger, but we didn't because we ran a proper sustainable business. So we can finance disasters like the coronavirus. When you look at the BDO, I'm not going to criticise the BDO. They are what they are. And I'm not going to criticise the WDF. Their heart's in the right place. But they don't have any money because they haven't ran a business that has put aside and run it properly so that, you know, they've got a sustainable operation. So I have no idea. All I know is that we are there to help, and that is a genuine offer, subject to them showing us that they can run a proper business. And, you know, once this epidemic is passing, there is going to be a backlog of not just my sports. I'm involved in 12 different sports now, but there's 100 sports out there. There's going to be a backlog of events. There's going to be an awful lot of competition for sponsors, for broadcast hours. We have long-term deals in place with most major broadcasters globally. We will have a certain amount of protection because of our size and reputation. Unfortunately, the BDO don't, and the WDF has no commercial expertise at all. Now, that's not being cruel, that's just being accurate, which is why we've said to the WDF, in principle, we'd like to help. We think a strong grassroots business globally is important to our success in the long term. It certainly spreads the gospel of darts, and we'd like to help. But I've yet to see a plan put in front of me that is workable.
We've received many listener questions. We'll finish up with a few of those. Earlier in the year, a potential darts shootout was spoken about by players, pundits and fans. Is there potential for such a tournament to be held by the PDC similar to the snooker version?
Not in the short term, no, because for the next 12 months, it's going to be massive catch-up. New ideas are going to be built around more social media, digital applications, perhaps more creative ideas like we're going to announce next week. But I think a new idea, which isn't a new idea, which is a shootout version, is not high on our agenda at the moment.
Now, 2 years into the expanded Ali Pali field, and it seems to be working well. What are your thoughts on it? And is the plan to keep it at the current 96-person size?
Yep. I think when something's not broken, I don't try and fix it. I think we've moved carefully with the field and the selection process. Well, you never can say there won't be a few more tweaks to it. You know, whether they should be looking at perhaps more women, perhaps more countries. There could be a few small tweaks, but nothing significant because the event is now established as one of the true global phenomenons of sport. It is what Christmas is all about. The prize money is decent and won't be going up for another year or so, but I don't see why it doesn't eventually climb up to double now. But they are long-term plans, and we're in a short-term world at the moment. So for the moment, I'm very happy with the World Championships. I just want to know that the event can safely be staged, and then all systems go, and we'll have another bonanza.
We've asked you this next one before, but with the success of Fallon Sherrick and Lisa Ashton, we've been sent in a few times. Is it time to start a ladies' tour of, say, 16 or 32 players? Linda Duffy, the ex-ladies world #1, sent that in and said that she'd be keen to help out.
Not really. No. Again, I mean, all plans of anything new are on the shelf. We're in a different world, and we've got to cope with this new world before we start looking at anything new. It is a statement of fact that last year's entries from women in the World Championship qualifier was down on the year before. That doesn't encourage me. We asked a lot of the women who entered 2 years ago, why didn't you enter this year? And they said, because we didn't think we had a chance. That's not a good thing. Now, do you do a very mini version, or is that more likely something that should be on the radar of the amateur bodies, properly organised, properly financed? I feel that's a job more for them. Our attitude at the PDC has always been a gender-free sport, and we will maintain that. There are no barriers to entry whatsoever. It's only built on ability, but we're not geared up with the structure we have, concentrating on Challenge Tour, developmental tours and main tour. We're not geared up for just a notional, PC-friendly, 16-player, little get-together type of event. It doesn't fit in the professional mode of what we're trying to do. And the challenge really is out to the women themselves to make the effort to improve and to be competitive against men, because there is no reason why they shouldn't be. We're not going to start saying we're going to do a tournament for left-handed people or a tournament for men who part their hair on the right instead of the left. We're basically saying this is a game of darts, play it to the highest standard you can. I don't make excuses. If you're not good enough, you can still enjoy the game socially, but it doesn't make you a professional player. So I think the challenge is there more for the BDO, should they exist, and the WDF, should they want to be involved. Again, we're always there to help, but we're realistic. In life, you have to do what you're good at. We are very, very, very good at what we do. We don't want to take on things where we're not very good at what we do, but we're quite happy to help financially for the greater good of the game.
Well, if you ever do start a tournament for left-handed people who part their hair on the right, let me know, because I might have a chance to qualify. I
understand the level you play at is probably your only chance, Burton, so...
Well, one more question, and you mentioned you only do things that you know you're good at. And this question comes from our producer, Hannah. If you could take over any other sport to promote and push it to the wider world, which one would you pick?
There's a choice. There are so many sports. As I get older, Burton, and probably as you do get older, and maybe health also brings this realism in, you become quite retrospective in your attitude. You look at things in a slightly different way. The more I look at professional sport, other than a few notable examples, it's true, but certainly what I would call the niche sport world, they are all pretty poorly administered and pretty poorly commercially exploited. That is a statement of fact. And there are lots of sports that have in the past been considered quite big sports that have failed in applying themselves, in being relevant in a changing market, in not being creative in their structural or financial roles. So it's not a question of one. There are dozens of sports that, frankly, are failing the participants by not being good enough. Sport generally, especially niche sports, where there isn't the money in at the beginning, generally the people that run those sports absolutely love that sport. You cannot fault their enthusiasm or their commitment, but it doesn't mean to say they're any good. It just means they're lovely people. So you may like gymnastics, you may like rugby league, you may like Scottish football, you may like athletics. If the player is not changing his life financially by sacrificing his life to achieve the standard necessary, in my view, you have failed. So looking back, there are a dozen, which would ring off my tongue, of sports that have been big in the past, but have not matured in today's changing world. They have not adapted to their target audience, and they've not listened. They've not listened to the requirements of broadcasters and fans and sponsors. Sport is about money, making money. There's not Corinthian standards. If we're asking people to dedicate their life, we have a responsibility to reward them for the extraordinary ability they have. A lot of sports don't do that, but they still love their sport. The Olympics is always a great example because everyone loves the Olympics, but you can't eat a medal. You've got to think about reward. And that's where they mostly go wrong. And, we've seen it with the BDO, darts, if you want to take that as an example. I'm sure the people involved in the BDO over the years love their darts. They've just not been very good at it, commercial exploitation. And that's an integral part of making a sport successful. So with that type of attitude, there's 10 or 20 sports out there that could benefit from a rethink of the way they operate. And whether they do or not, or whether they think sport is bigger than money, which is a nice sentiment to have, it's just totally inaccurate in today's world.
Well, Barry, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you the best on your recovery, and we hope to see some sport in the very near future.
I think you're going to see it quite quickly. So look forward to that in the next couple of days. Matt Poulter and his team will come out with various announcements that will, at least, I hope, in these difficult times, put a smile on your face.